Thanks, Leah. I realized maybe I should have included a little bit of verse 13 as well, which says, for you were called to freedom, brothers. So that might have been a better stopping place, but we'll get to the emasculation later. So a couple of things I thought it might be good to give you guys a little announcement, some announcements and updates on me. So as many of you know, I was hired in January and started coming back and forth for Raleigh. That my entire family isn't going to come until June when my daughter has graduated. So a couple of exciting things that I guess some of you guys know about, and my wife is probably posted on Facebook. I'm not into all that really, very rarely. But anyway, one is we accepted an offer on our house in Raleigh. And so we're very excited about that. That's and we have we'll close on May 9th, so that's really soon. We're gonna rent back for 2 months so that gives us a little bit of time to start searching diligently for a house around here. So that would be the next prayer request, just continue to pray that we would find a house and be able to take that next step. So, and again, I do think it is worth talking about because God has been very faithful and moving very quickly in one step after another, just getting us here, whether it's being voted in and then the approval of the presbytery, the back and forth, succeeding, and all that stuff. So I thought I'd just share that personally with you guys. Yeah, I'm excited about that. The second thing is my daughter did decide where she wants to go to school. So she's going to go to Fordham, which is a small school in New York City, right in the middle of the Bronx. So she is just kind of a city girl. That's what she's always wanted to do, kind of her dream. She has a boyfriend in Raleigh that's kind of maybe holding her back a little bit in the sense of, not because, I should just stop talking. Okay, strike this from the live stream. Do not mention to my daughter that I was talking about her in this way. Anyway, the hardest part of making the decision to go to kind of what would essentially be her dream school was that she'll have to have a long distance relationship with her boyfriend, who I very much like. And so that's just, so we're all good in case Justin is watching as well. Justin, hello. We are coming to the end of Galatians too, which is really exciting to me because it's the end of our first series together. And we've got 2 or 3 sermons, let's see, 1, 2, 3, including today, 3 sermons left. I think you'll notice that it's going to get very practical here at the end, as Paul sometimes does in his letters. And so I hope that we can kind of remember way back in January when Paul and Peter were having this argument, and we can kind of put all these things together with some real practical applications moving forward. And then after that, there'll be a sermon series called Co-heirs and Co-laborers, which is really going to be a look at the ways that God has created men and women to partner together in ministry and to use their gifts in the church. And I've been reading a lot of books, listening to podcasts, and interviewing people, and that's going to be the next sermon series that I'll carry through the summer. Okay, so check the weekly update. I think Elsa sent out a note about that, and you get more information going through. Does that sound good? Okay, cool. All right, so I'm really into coffee. Okay. The Benishes know this because they don't really drink coffee, but they smell coffee in the morning every morning. They know I'm there and awake because I've made coffee. I'm not only into making coffee, but I'm into really good coffee. Okay, not really an arrogant person, but I can make some good coffee. So several years ago, this is where it all started. Julie, for my birthday one year, she sent me to a brew science class with Counterculture, which was a local roaster out of Durham. We're living in North Carolina. And it was basically like the sessions where they trained their baristas. So it was me and like 9 baristas in training. Okay, you guys now think I'm so forth. Okay. What I learned in that class and in making coffee is that coffee is more of a science than an art. Okay. I mean, you only have 2 ingredients, right? You have coffee and water. So just the very specific calculations that you make when you're dealing with coffee and water make a huge difference. How coarse the grinds are, how hot the water is, what kind of water you're using. I mean, this is really crazy, right? And the most important is the formula, how much coffee and how much water. Okay, from all this you want to know. 17 grams of water per gram of coffee. Okay, so yeah, you have to get a little scale. You can order those online. It's all about measuring control and perfection, right? So come over, I'll make you some coffee one of these days. All right, so here's the problem. What I want you to keep in your mind is that idea of having a formula, okay? The problem is, I think some of us approach our spiritual lives in the same way that I approach coffee, okay? There's got to be a formula. If I can measure the right amount, then the product will be perfect, right? If I can control what goes in, then the outcome on the other end is going to be amazing. It's going to be good. Just give me the formula. But there's a problem with that approach. What's the problem? It's just not how it works. That is exactly right. And one of the big reasons is because God is a relational being, and we relate to all these other humans, and humans aren't coffee, God's not coffee, right? It's all about a relationship that you have. It's not about a formula. It's not like you can measure and control what's happening. Life just doesn't work that way. Somebody might come to me who wants marital counseling, right? And they would say, how do I love my wife? My first response is a question, not a solution. It's not, go read this book, take these 7 steps. Here's a program, enter this discipleship course. None of that, right? It's, who's your wife? Who are you? What have your experiences been like together? Do you know what I mean? There is not a one size. What I hope you're seeing out of Galatians with this realm of freedom is that there's not a one size fits all formula to relationships with each other or to with the God who created you, that there is something else that's at work, and that is not what we're going to get into, is not only doing the right thing, but doing the right thing at the right time, which is wisdom. And I think verse 6 is, one commentator calls this the most important verse in Galatians, and the most important verse in all of Paul's epistles. It is neither circumcision nor uncircumcision that counts for anything. What matters is faith working through love. What matters is not just being right about the talking hand, but doing the right thing at the right time in the way that's most loving to the people who are around you. And I think that the freedom that Paul is inviting us to involves this wisdom. And for those of you who have been with us, we don't even need to rehearse it again, but I will for the sake of those who are visiting today. Throughout this whole book, Paul has been saying, what are these Galatian Christians trying to do? We need a formula for what to eat. We need a formula for who to eat with. We need a formula for when to take a rest. We need a formula for circumcision, and so it's not that they didn't have faith in Jesus, it's just that they were going back to the formulas, and that those formulas never had the ability to bring them life. And as Nathan reminded you guys last week, when I was out, we as humans have in our heart this tendency to not only treat the Old Testament this way, but just to make these same sorts of rules all the time about all sorts of things. Have you picked up on that for the series? Okay, good. So we're all in the same place. And Paul's saying, I feel like at this point I finally need to say, he's not saying never make a rule. You know what I mean? He's not saying, do you know what I mean? He's not saying that. He's not saying the world should just be chaos, right? But what he is saying is, rules are unavoidable, but he's saying they are limited compared to the freedom that comes in depending on Jesus and Jesus alone through the power of the Spirit. And that is an incredible thing to say. And so the message here today, as we do try to get a little bit practical, is that since Jesus frees you from the law and from that tendency to want to control things by a formula, take a look at how faith works itself out in love in your life and in our lives and like our church and the people around you. Okay, so I want to look at that from 2 or 3 different perspectives, and we'll scan through the passage. Number 1, you are free from your slavery to the formulas. Here's the problem again with the law. Some of this is repetition with the formulas. They seem very attractive, like they would be freeing and helpful, right? I want to make good coffee. I can make good coffee. That's good. I don't have to worry about it. I always have good coffee. But what happens is they start to exert control over you. Have you noticed this? So even with my little coffee example, I'll get some real personal examples in a minute, but what happens if I accidentally put a little too much water in? I'm pulling my hair out, right? But what happens if something goes wrong? You know what I mean? I'm like, I talk to Julie, and Julie's like, it's coffee, man. Like, this is not that big of a deal. I'm like, no, it must be perfect, right? It becomes a thing that should be good, but it starts to exercise a control over me. Paul says in verse 1, it is for freedom itself that Jesus Christ has set us free. You need that to stand firm again, and don't submit again to a yoke of slavery, to a yoke to the law, to the things that tend to exert control over you, to the things that you thought would give you a good spiritual life, but aren't because they are frustrating you. Think about this. So the burden has been removed, and he did that just for freedom itself. You know what I mean? For freedom. He wants you in a realm of freedom. God is good. God loves you. He doesn't want you to place these heavy burdens on yourself or these heavy burdens on other people. Even as I'm saying that, I just thought, anybody ever been in a church and felt like they just placed a heavy burden on me? You know? A lot of us have had those experiences in our past. And Paul's like, no. Freedom is what you were created for, a freeing relationship with the God who has made you and who loves you. And think about the laws again, one more time. Like, there's no end to the law. If you keep the law, if you want to be bound by the law, right? Paul says you have to be bound by the whole law. And part of the burden of that, part of the slavery to that is Monday I have to keep the law. Well, what happens Tuesday? You got to keep the law again. What happens Wednesday? You got to keep the law again. What happens Thursday? And what happens if I have a bad day on Friday? Boom, you're done, right? But freedom doesn't work that way. Freedom is, like every day is Sunday. Every day is Easter Sunday. Every day is the risen Jesus. Every day is a power to walk in newness and to love people in ways that you haven't before. Not a rigid obedience that cannot be satisfied. I am here to tell you, the laws that you create for yourself and for other people will never be satisfied. Open yourselves up to another way. And Paul's pointing us towards that new way. And it is a powerful new way. Secondly, as I've said over and over and over, the law cannot give you the ability to obey it. No amount of other people trying to tell you what to do are going to guarantee that you want to do those things. In fact, right, I tell my son, I need you to be back by 10:30, right? The more I tell him, what does he want to do more? Yeah, like you've all been kids once, right? Sons and daughters, right? They're like, hey, can I remind you? 10:30. By the way, 10:30. In fact, you may want to kind of come home at 10:15 just to make sure you're home by 10:30. It's like, Dad, you're killing me, Dad. No. And in fact, he's like, I'll just go home at 10:35 just to see. Right? Anybody ever done that? It's not an accident. You know what I mean? You're like, let's see if there's any teeth to this thing. And then the worst thing I can do is just like yell some more, right? Why didn't you do that? I didn't want to. The Holy Spirit changes your desires. That's freedom, not telling you what to do. That's a burden. That's a huge burden. It's one of the reasons I think this book is so powerful. Okay, I'm going to make a claim. I'm going to give you some examples because I've been reading things recently. And you'll get a little foretaste of our next sermon series. I think evangelical Christians love formulas. Man, I think they like it's the best formulas, like rules and application stuff is like the best thing that ever happened to them. Okay? So I'm reading all of these books. This is just one example on gender roles. What are the roles of husbands? What are the roles of men in the church? What are the roles of women? What are the roles of wives? What are the roles of single people? I'm reading all these books and books about that stuff. Here's what, and there are passages they're so hard to interpret that there are just thousands of words that have been written about them. I mean, it's like a lot. There's a lot of words out there. Here's what I've noticed. Complementarians, that's just a fancy word for those who oftentimes want to limit the roles of women in the church. Okay, I'm just going to say it that way. If you want more of this, I'll give you lots of more later. Tends to jump very quickly from the very difficult to interpret passages to a bunch of rules about the passages. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, here's what men are always like, here's what husbands must always do, here's what women cannot do. And in the end, I'll give you a very real example, it gets super weird. Like there's one famous passage in an author who's writing to defend all this stuff. He's like, if a man should not ask a woman for directions because he's then like submitting to her authority or something like that, and you're just like, that's nuts, dude. Like that's crazy, right? But it's the result of like trying to. And why is that crazy? It's crazy because it goes beyond what the Bible says. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm like, do what the Bible says. Like, I'm Bible, okay? Like, I'm for the Bible, okay? But only do what the Bible says. Don't add a bunch of stuff on top of it that then is going to get crazy. That's a yoke of slavery, not a yoke, not freedom. Freedom comes doing what it says, but only what it says. Okay? So we have two problems: not doing what it says, but also adding to it. All right? And more rules just never help people. On the flip side, egalitarians can be the same way. So that's the group of people who are like, want kind of a radical equality for all men and women in all situations and strains. And I read one such author who was so irritated at the abuses, kind of like the one that I just explained, that she said she fundamentally created a whole new set of rules for herself, which is like, if I'm not stopping complementarians, I'm not doing the will of God. Do you know what I mean? And then it turned into this battle that was like, at all times, in every way, I have to make sure that there's equality. And the danger there was like, not everyone who makes different decisions than you is like a misogynist or patriarchal or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And not it lends itself to rigidity too. To see, there's like an extra biblical self-righteousness over here, dangerous. Extra biblical self-righteousness over here. Okay, and Paul's not exactly thinking about that issue. It's just one example. I'm like, one of the problems is how much we like a formula. Give me a formula so I always know what to do. Give me a formula so I always know what to do. But freedom comes in the spirit and not formulas. Okay? Is that okay? Example, everyone with me here? Okay. I'm with you now, it's good. You can pursue freedom in a few ways. Ask yourself this: this is the hard one, where has my obedience become formulaic? Where am I really interested in measuring things, controlling other people? And again, you guys will hear me say this all over the place. It will, you just hopefully watch out for moral crusades because of the tendency that we have to become so rigid and self-righteous when we're actually smarter if we listen to the people who disagree with us. Okay? All right, I think that's there what Paul's saying. All right, number 2. Now, do you have justification for this all underneath? Yes, I think I do. Okay. To look at it from a different angle, Jesus didn't fit the formula. Okay, are you with me? Point number 2. Formulas can be slavery. Jesus didn't fit into a formula. Like, if you look back at the text, Jesus is everywhere. For freedom, Christ has set us free. If you accept circumcision, Christ, who should be of advantage to you, will be no advantage to you. If you do this, you are severed from Christ. And then in the sort of pinnacle of the passage, he says, in Christ, when you are in Christ, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision counts for anything, but only faith working through love. Our access to the spiritual health that comes from living a formula-free life happens only in Jesus. And this Jesus is one that if you examine his life, you see is filled with freedom and out formula. So think about this. Let me put it this way, we'll get back to the text. Did Jesus only reach out to one type of person? No, not at all, right? Pharisees, tax collectors, prostitutes, zealots, fishermen, right? Did Jesus ever only offer one dogmatic answer to anything? It's not a trick question. Go back, see how many times he asks a question. People ask him a question, he asks a question. And I'm like, boom, like there's no one like Jesus for that. For carrying on a conversation that's like, doesn't just shut people down because that's the thing. I don't know the answer to that, right? Because he's loving people, he's working through them. Does Jesus lead like the human king? No. He defies every expectation where he could have taken power and control for himself. He serves others. He washes feet. He's crucified. You who call yourself a Christian, worship a man who died on a cross. You know, who are you to put yourself over anybody else? Right? Who can stand and be arrogant at the foot of the cross? I don't know. That's a challenge. Like that's a challenge. And if he had no human formula, then what? He was filled with the Spirit, depending on the Father to love people to the end. He was in the realm of freedom. See, here's the thing. Formulas are easy. Loving people is challenging. In order to love people, you have to depend on this Jesus. So I'm going to work that out just a little bit. Okay. Can I give you another example? Okay. Let's say, then just a domestic example here. And I'm going to raise the bar in a minute, but we're going to lower the bar for a second. Let's say it's my job to take out the trash. Okay. It is. It's my job. Julie's like, I'm not touching trash. That's just it. Okay. So we have all these things to do, right? Let's say I've been neglecting taking out trash. So I haven't taken out trash. Julie has options, right? Her option is, do I confront Duane and rebuke him for not taking out trash? It's like, this is not a silly example. It's okay to laugh, right? Or do I let it go? Right? Do I just let it go? Okay. Or do I take the trash out myself? Right? She could say that too. This would actually be more fun if she was here. We'd see what she has. The problem is, most of us can tend to a one-to-one way of thinking, and it might be on either side. I know Christians who are like, if X happens, Y happens. This person says, we rebuke. This person doesn't do what they're supposed to, we challenge. This person missed a mark, we show them the mark. Have you ever had anything like that? Okay, there's a whole set, and family relationship is very frustrating because you feel like you're, and again, it doesn't have to be someone you're married to, it could be a roommate or something, or your parent, like, you feel like that person is always coming down on you because it just has a one-to-one. Well, Jesus said, if my brother sins, right, didn't Jesus say that? Take your brother aside and confront him, and if he doesn't listen, take another person, right? So Jesus says to confront, however, I don't know, maybe there's more than just that, right? Okay, secondly, on the flip side, there's so much where it's like, I'm just gonna let it go. I'm just gonna let it go. I'm just gonna let it go. Because there's other places in the Bible that say overlook an offense, right? Maybe it's more godly to overlook an offense. And if maybe you're the kind of person who tends to that side. Some of the aggressive people in the room probably just like to rebuke. Passive people in the room like to let it go. Okay? But there's no one-to-one, right? It's here we go. Now I'm going to try to tie together. It's not circumcision. It's not uncircumcision. If it's not that, if it's not aggressive or it's not passive, it's not all the time this or it's not all the time that, then what is it? Faith working through love. What does that mean? That means I have a choice every time. Maybe I should rebuke and confront. Maybe I should let it go. How do you know? It's tough. It's tough, right? I mean, you know by asking yourself this question, what's the most loving thing to do in this situation with that person? And man, maybe you've confronted 10 times and you need to let that person alone. Maybe that person had a terrible day and you need to just ask, is everything okay with you? Okay? Or maybe that person's a slacker. Like maybe I have been intentionally not taking out the trash just to see what will happen. And maybe I need to be confronted. I need to be reassured. I'm not saying less. I'm not saying more. I'm saying the only way that the free Christian knows the difference between less and more is to ask themselves every time, what's the most loving thing for this person who's right in front of me? Wow, I'm just like, dude, I'm not doing that all the time. And the hard thing about that is that sometimes you don't know, which means you can't decide on your own. You have to rely on the Holy Spirit to show you what's the most loving thing. And you're going to recognize all the time, I'm not always doing the most loving thing. And then you're going to repent and say, I'm sorry I didn't do the most loving thing. And all that comes through in very close relationships where you're learning to get to know each other. It's not a formula, right? Okay, are you with me so far? Okay, that's a greater freedom. That's a greater freedom. What's the Spirit doing in this situation? What's the best way to love this person? I mean, think of another, again, I'm using these sort of random examples. I had to cut this sermon in half. You're already probably like, it's way too long. But I cut it in half because of how many examples I had. If you want more examples of this, I will fire them all. Like, I thought of schooling. Christians love to decide where people should go to school, right? And you've got your like homeschool camp, and you've got your Christian school camp, and you've got your public school camp. And I'm just like, maybe there isn't just one way. Maybe it's what's going to help this particular kid flourish. I don't know. Maybe that's public school for a while, and maybe it's Christian school, and maybe it's, and if we really got that and believed that, you know, how much grace we would give each other. Man, I could have avoided so many arguments about schooling if everybody would just be like, what's the most loving thing for this kid? And oh, you're not a crazy legalist. You're not a crazy antinomian who doesn't care. You're just trying to love your kid. Yeah. I mean, and again, I give you example after example after example after example. It's easy to have decided. It's easy to just have the facts. It's hard to revisit and ask the Spirit to show us. But Paul calls that freedom, and we would have such a harmonious community if we kept asking in every situation, what's the most loving thing to do with this person? And I think Paul has been building to that the whole time. Okay, I think he's been building that the whole time. All right, finally, third point. Letting go of your formulas will help you make room for the Spirit's power. And I think that's where he lands. And we'll get to the strong language. I'm not emphasizing on strong language, but we'll get there. Okay, let go of your formulas to make room for the Spirit's power. Paul basically says, you were running well, who hindered you from obeying the truth? This is in verse 7. And he says, the persuasion is not from him who calls you, a little leaven's the whole lump, but I have confidence in the Lord that you're going to do something else. He's basically describing, imagine if there's a runner running, you know, like say you're watching the Olympics, and there's these runners who are running, let's say it's like the women's 200-meter hurdles or whatever, and then, you know, people are running as fast as they can, and what he describes is somebody stepping in. You know how sometimes somebody will just move over a little bit and trips up the person who was about to win? Maybe you guys have all seen this? It happens. Okay, it happens. He's saying there were these impediments that got in. Like you had joy, you were happier, you really were happier with freedom. You had truth. You knew what you needed to know, but suddenly, just like a little bit of leaven in bread that you're baking, just like a runner tripping up, he got easily tripped up. Now, why did they get tripped up? Again, to go back to it, I think it's because of pride. I think it's pride that trips them up and us up, and that's the defensiveness, just the need to be right. You know what I mean? I know the right way to make coffee. I know the right way to school. I know, we have this sense that we need to defend ourselves. And Paul's saying, if I cared about any of that stuff, no one would ever persecute me. You don't persecute people for making good coffee or for making right decisions. You persecute people for saying, no matter how hard you try, you're probably going to end up making the wrong decision. That makes people mad. I'm gonna persecute you for that. That doesn't make any sense. And he says the center of the cross is an offensive power. Sending a man to die in this horrific way in that ancient Greco-Roman world, he says, was an offense to all human sensibilities because every human creates a system for getting themselves along. And he's saying this takes down all of those systems. Jesus dying on the cross is offensive. People don't want to hear about it because it crushes our pride. Like, I want to get by on my own. But the cross says, no, you can't get by on your own. You need help. It comes from outside yourself. And you have to yield yourself to it. But think for a minute of this Jesus on a cross. Think about it for a minute. When he dies on this cross, he is stripped of every formula. There aren't any formulas left on the cross. He's not measuring anything. You don't measure the agony of a man screaming as he dies. There's no sense of control. There's no sense of power. He can't feed himself. He can't offer himself. Someone has to reach up and offer him something to drink. He says, think of the things he says on the cross. I'm so thirsty right now. Into your hands, Lord, I commit my spirit. This is a man who gives up all control and is bound by one thing and one thing alone. What in this moment is the most likely to do? That's what happened. And he pushed through. And in honor of that, his father raised him from the dead. That's incredible. It's incredible. This is hard, and I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. Think of how offensive it is to have those things stripped away. Are you motivated by pride, defensiveness, self-protection? Maybe you think, I need my friends to know how good a student I am. I need my parents to know how good this decision was. I still feel that way. I need my children to have an outstanding life. What happens when Jesus takes all that stuff away? It's an offense to your pride. It feels like a death. I'm going to ask it this way. What if you never again got credit for anything that you did? How would that hit you? Would you have anything left? Paul says it now, you got everything. That's what he says. It's like, it looks like nothing, but in fact, it's everything. You have right there the Father's acceptance, the only one who really matters. Which Father matters? The Father who created you. Which Son matters? The Son who stands in your place. Man, I think of these old men and women who were sort of in church history, who got this better than probably contemporary Americans do. Teresa of Avila, medieval Catholic woman who wrote, she would eat all of her meals out of a hollowed out piece of human skull. It's really weird, I know. To remind herself of this fact. With myself, I have nothing. With Jesus, I have everything. Charles Wesley famously would preach with a coffin in front of him, and you heard that before. Sometimes he would drag out a coffin, put it out there, and then preach. It's to remind himself that of these things. With myself, I have nothing. With Jesus, I have everything. Think of Martin Luther King Jr. How many times people threw rocks to his house, bombed his house, and how often he didn't run away or shy from those things. He took those things to remind himself of this. With myself, I have nothing. With Jesus, I have everything. With Jesus, I have everything. I'm reminded of a friend of mine with my first church. He said, man, he got me. His name was Jay Barbieri. He ran a plumbing supply store. He was an old, kind of old school Italian American. He was an elder at the church. And Jay would take me to the diner. He'd practice it. Wait, what your problem is? Your problem is you try to put everything in a box. I was like, Jay, what are you talking about? You want everything to be too neat. You want to control everything. And you want a little pretty bow on it. I want you one day to get outside the box. And I thought that was meant just for me, but then I found out from other pastors that he gave that same speech. So he just want everybody outside the box. But as I think about it, I think about that man, not only my coffee formula, but my 10-year plan, my sermon series plans, my structure at order, man, how much I want those things, right? You guys hired me to help build systems, right? But what if we all major on, myself included, dying to ourselves, dying to our systems, asking by faith, what's the best way right now to love the people in front of me? That would be cool, right? That would be the system. that would have the power to be the system. I'll invite you to think of one problem in the church, in your family, in your life, with your friends, that you can't solve. After asking yourself what's the right thing to do here, go back and ask yourself what's the most likely. Think about that. It may sometimes feel or look like you're giving them a pass, right? If you are super gracious. It may look like becoming more strict. I mean, in the end, Paul does say, what he's saying there, I finally got there. What he's saying in the last verse is, if you guys want to rely on circumcision, why don't you just keep cutting? Is basically what he's saying. It is a joke. And Paul is not a softie who is just like anything goes. That's what I want you to see. But in some situations, they require complication. Other situations require a great patience and passivity. He's saying there's a divine patience and a divine impatience. Again, what if we die to ourselves and our systems and ask by faith how we can love all people in front of me? I think that'd be a great application of all of our Galatians. Let me pray. Father, thank you so much for the gift that you've given us in your spirit of a freedom that we don't even always know what to do with. Would you help us truly examine our hearts and see where we are resting on formulas rather than on the freedom that you have given us? And I pray, as you free us to try to love people, that it would be accompanied with the joy and love and kindness that Paul talks about. That we would just realize, man, I pray that you set people free. And I couldn't presume to know all